Welcome to Corpse Club, the official podcast of dailydead.com. I'm one of your co-hosts, Jonathan James, and I'm joined today by Derek Anderson, Bryan Christopher, and Scott Drebit. Today we are getting in our time machine, and we're traveling back to 1980 as part of our Class of 1980 special feature series that we've had here on Daily Dead. If you haven't had a chance to go to Daily Dead in the last week or so, we launched our annual Class of feature, which includes some special guests and a lot of people from the Daily Dead team talking about standout films from 1980. So if you haven't had a chance to, go to dailydead.com and you'll be able to easily find some of our Class of 80 special features. We've also had some podcast episodes as well, including today's, like I said, which is dedicated to entertainment in 1980, not just movies, but we're going to talk about TV and video games and other things that may be of interest, kind of like what we did for our 2010s retrospective last year. So anyway, so we're going to do the same style. And I think the interesting thing about this, though, is that unlike the 2010s, I believe that, Scott, you are the only one that was alive in 1980. Scott, how old were you in 1980?
I was 10, Jonathan.
Exactly. So you were, it doesn't matter what age you were. I'm curious, but whether you were 10 or 15 or 5, you are the only one that can legitimately talk about this and like, yes, in 1980, this is what was going on. We can just imagine. In some cases, like Derek is really going to imagine. But for me, it was mere years away.
It was a glorious year. What can I tell you? A lot of great movies. I really got my first appreciation, I think, of music right around that age. And, of course, then you got your video games as well. So I'm sure we have a lot of cool stuff to discuss.
We do, and I kind of outed you here by saying that you were alive in 1980 because
right.
they had the Twitter, what do you call it? I guess it's a Twitter game, right? That's going around where, I'm not super active on Twitter, but I watch everybody else, and it was basically guess what age I am without looking it up, and and I know that Scott, you got a lot of we'll call them good guesses.
Completely. I had a 25, which was just a sweet joke one, I'm pretty sure. I had a couple 36s, a couple 38s, a few 40s. A 42, I think, was the oldest that I got. So it was a good day, as you would say.
And I think to make it doubly sweet for Scott, karma finally caught up with me because I was also playing that game. And anyone who has seen what I look like knows I'll call it prematurely grayed, and I look a little bit older than I am. So he was getting undershot. I was getting overshot. So a lot of people were guessing we were around the same age, like low 40s. So it was.
I told you it was a good day.
It was a bit of a kick in the crotch.
I did see that one too. And it's like, like some people, they're expecting good things. They don't get it. Not always. We don't get what we want in this world. Things.
I'm so used to people over guessing my age that I knew that's what was coming.
Yeah, Derek, now you have to do it.
Yeah, I'm a little, I don't know what I'll get on that one. Depends on the day.
And I just don't have a Twitter account, so I can't. I'll take over the Daily Dead account, post a picture of myself. That's a good use of Daily Dead's Twitter account.
There you go. Yeah, you can use the zombie icon.
Yeah, how old do you think the zombie is? It's almost 10 years old because the Daily Dead 10-year anniversary is coming up. That zombies.
No, what you got to do, Jonathan, is post a picture of yourself with that child snap filter.
Oh, yeah, that one's good.
And just creep everybody out.
I've done it a few times where I just sit there, and as long as I don't talk, people don't know how to interact. They assume, because I was using Snap Filter, for our listeners, and it gives, you can do a young version of you. So people just assumed it was my son. So like, hi, how are you? And I'm like, I'm good. I do like that one. Okay, but let's talk a little bit about 1980 before we talk about entertainment in 1980. Let's take us all back and thanks to thepeopleininhistory.com, we have some nice information that'll kick us off. And it talks about the average cost of a new house. If you were 1980 and you were looking for a new house, the average cost was $68,700. So that's how much it would cost.
That's 68,000 more than I have right now. So
the average income per year was $19,500. And let's see, the average monthly rent was $300. Cost of a gallon of gas was $1.19. The next one kind of hurts. Is the average cost of a new car, which is $7,200. That's a big difference.
Right off the line. That is wild.
I don't know. I think my dad in 1980 was driving a Datsun, a green Datsun, I may add. And they don't even make Datsuns anymore.
Like a pine green or like a pea soup green?
No, it was like a pine green.
That sounds gorgeous.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's... I remember, cars in that era.
And then my brother totaled it.
Was it resurrected
Jamaica,
a la Christine?
What a country. What can I say? My brothers had fun in Jamaica.
Can you imagine if Christine was a pine green Datsun?
That was the sequel, I'm sure.
Yeah, show me.
Show me all the extra storage space in this more practical car.
And I'm looking here. If you wanted a Magnavox VHS recorder, it was going to set you back $699.
Oh my gosh.
I might be able to get a PlayStation 5 for less than a VHS player.
on our way down, because we moved to Jamaica in February of 80. On our way down there, we stopped in Miami and we got a VHS player, a Panasonic top loader, because everyone said you have to have a video player, otherwise, you'll go nuts because there's like no TV. There was one channel, the JBC, and it came on at 4 p.m. So you needed to get your entertainment on videotapes, which were just blossoming at the time. But yeah, I'm pretty sure it cost around the same amount when we got our first one. And each videotape that we bought, because we took about 3 or 4 down with us to start off, was like between $30 and $80.
And what would, even beyond the cost, what would the availability of videotapes have been at that point?
Well, for sale, not that many. They hit the rental market first. Sales came, like I said, not a lot of people are going to buy an $80 video cassette, but rent them. Sure. Right. So there weren't a lot. I think the first one we got was the first Friday the 13th from 1980. A Clockwork Orange. My dad picked that one. And Norma Ray. My mom picked that one. Those were the first 3 videotapes.
An eclectic mix.
And yes, it's an interesting triple feature. Let's put it that way. You might want to lead off with Norma Ray and then go from there.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, it's so interesting with VHS because, again, a lot of people, unless you lived during that time, you don't realize how big of a delay there was in some cases between when a movie hit theaters and when it was eventually available on VHS. And, it was crazy in some cases. Well, as you mentioned, Scott, you couldn't buy it. If you were going to buy it, you were paying an incredible price. Or if you were unfortunate enough to leave your, VHS in the back of your car and it gets melted and then you get charged hundreds of dollars. But yeah, there were things like we're talking about 1980 movie releases, and Empire Strikes Back came out in 80, but it wasn't widely available until around or after the time Return of the Jedi was released. Which is kind of crazy to think about it. So, I know people are like, well, you got to wait, in some cases a few months or 6 months, but people are waiting years in some cases to get their hands on a VHS after it was released to theaters.
All the more incentive to see it in theaters too.
This is very true.
Yeah, because it was such a new market, right, at the time. So if you went and saw a movie in 1980 in the theater, your mindset was of, well, I don't know if I'm ever going to see this movie again. But that's how it was when I was a kid growing up. Was you saw a movie on the big screen, and then maybe it might show up on TV. But there wasn't this, I can watch this in my house, anytime I want, all the time. We didn't think like that. We didn't have that mindset, right? It's like you watched it once on the big screen, and then you talked about it, and then maybe it showed up on TV a few years later.
It was like,
and that was that.
Yeah, it was like, going to see a concert or a sports event.
Totally.
Yeah, I was looking here, and I'm looking at like the first release of A New Hope. The first Star Wars was in '82. The first release of Empire Strikes Back was in '84. So it's like, it's crazy to think about, but
yeah,
that was the market.
So as coming from that generation who just had TV, just had the big screen, indoor or outdoor, when the video market hit, for people who loved movies, it was like the greatest thing ever, because not only could you rewatch movies that you already knew and loved, but there was a whole new world of movies that you missed in the theater because you didn't get to go see every movie. Right. Mm-hmm. So that was mind blowing for a young movie lover. It's like I was grabbing everything off the shelf, mostly horror, of course, but comedy, action. Like I wanted to see it all because now it all opened up to us, right?
Now, Scott, did you still have that same dilemma, though, of like you have this whole new world that opens up to you, but you still want to go back and watch that same movie 27 times?
Yeah, completely. Totally. When you found a movie, it's funny. That's something that you develop as a kid, but I don't think you ever really get rid of because I just 2 nights ago, I watched Phantasm again.
Never heard of it.
Never heard of it? I'll tell you about it sometime.
Cool.
So yeah, that mentality was built in. If usually you would get a movie, we would go to the store and you'd get like 7 movies for the weekend. They were like $2 a piece or whatever it was. And you make a whole weekend out of it with the family. Now my mom and dad were pretty liberal in terms of what we watched. By the time I was 10, I was seeing every R-rated movie. They were a little uncomfortable with sex, but of course violence is perfectly fine, right? So you would have them for the weekend, and then I would find myself when it was time for the movie to go back, we would go back the following weekend to rent more movies. I would rent the same one again, usually one out of the bunch, right?
Well, that was always like by the time I was getting into the video rental market, so I guess this would have been by the time I was 5 or 6 is when I would have started renting movies. So we're talking like very late 80s, early 90s. A lot of the video stores you'd go to, and I don't know if this was already the case for you, Scott, but like they actually had deals that would promote kind of renting them that way. Because a lot of the ones around me would do the like rent 2 new ones and get like 1 old one either for a deep discount or for free for the weekend. So it kind of fit well because it would push you towards seeing the newer stuff,
sure.
But then it also gave the little kid in you the chance to revisit that one that you always want to see again.
No, you go ahead, Scott.
Oh, I was just going to say no. The video store that we had in Mandeville, in the town that we lived in Jamaica, was a small store with lined walls essentially going around, and that was it. Just because it was the beginning of it, and we didn't have any special 2-for-1 blah blah blahs, any of that kind of thing. It was just everything was $2, and there wasn't a new release section because, well, whether the movie was 20 years old or 1 year old, they were all new releases, right?
Yeah, one of my favorite things was it wasn't like there wasn't a discount that I remember, but you know, and I lived in Chicago for a while. There's like a local, it's called like Pick a Flick. And so we go there and it was like, you know, rent 3 and you get a big bag of popcorn. So me being a little kid, like I always want to make sure we got our movies so that like enough of them so that I could take my popcorn home with me. So that I always remember. But when I look here at movies that were released in 1980 to home video, it's interesting because what looks like first releases for the Muppet movie, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. And again, this was, you know, these are movies that had, you know, been released in theaters a while back, but then just hitting VHS for the first time. The Black Hole, Bedknobs and Broomsticks, Escape to Witch Mountain. And then Alien first hit VHS in 1980. Jaws first hit VHS in 1980. The Wizard of Oz saw its release in October of 1980, and Mary Poppins as well. So it's interesting to see what kind of movies were, you know, as Scott, as you mentioned, were new releases to people who were hitting the video store then.
Yeah, and they held back on a lot of I think the big ones, and those were a lot of big ones that you mentioned there. They held back on those releasing just to see what this whole, you know, quote unquote video market was going to be like, because a lot of money, you know, is invested in it to do that reproduction. So, you know, some of the earliest ones on the market that I used to see on the shelves a lot in Jamaica was Media Entertainment, which was the Band Family. Right before they had Full Moon, Empire, everything they had Media Entertainment, and that's Halloween was first released on Media. That's how I first saw it.
Yeah, and I do know that logo well.
Yeah. Wow. So there was a lot of movies that were released on the independents got in there first, and then once the majors saw how it was panning out, then they decided we better get in on this.
Yeah, but do we pick Betamax or do we pick VHS or both?
Yeah, I've seen both, and VHS is better. They said VHS had better sound, Beta had better picture. But I don't know if that's true or not. But they lost, so. Yeah,
it's kind of like HD DVD and Blu-ray.
Right.
I do have generation. HD DVDs. Yeah, every generation.
Hold on to those; they'll be worth something someday.
Yeah, I have Star Trek: The Original Series on HD DVD.
Kind of rolls off the tongue, doesn't it?
I think it sounds better, but you know, I wasn't the one making the decision. So okay, well let's jump into movies a little bit. We're gonna do, you know, for anyone who hasn't listened to our 2010s retros, we just kind of weave in and out. And we just use this as an excuse to catch up, basically, or talk all kinds of entertainment. But we also do want to have all of us pick some movies to talk about a little bit. 1980 was packed with some standouts, whether it was horror or sci-fi or action or otherwise. And so we're going to talk about some of those movies today. Some of those movies we haven't covered in Class of 80. Some of them we have, and maybe somebody else did them, but we're going to talk about those today. And so, Scott, I will let you kick things off, and why don't you tell me about your 1980s pick that you want to talk about, or 1980.
Okay. The great thing about doing like a Class of 80 and having a podcast on it is you get to talk about movies that normally wouldn't come up possibly in our other conversations. So, damn it, I'm going with Humanoids from the Deep, which I did do a dust-off on years ago, directed by Barbara Peters, but she'll deny it if you ask her. She wasn't too fond of the finished product, as Mr. Roger Corman of New World Pictures went back and inserted more nudity and gore, which he felt that the movie was lacking. So what you have is essentially you have a monsters attack movie mixed in with a good old ecological message. Pollutants in the water, bad. They create fishmen who rape and impregnate the local women. You get your Doug McClure, you get your Vic Morrow, you get your Ann Turkel. You get a lot of great effects by Rob Bottin. And you just have a lot of good sleazy fun.
So this is a movie that I always have on my list. I saw it a long time ago, but I've had a Scream Factory Blu-ray of this, and I haven't watched it since it hit Blu-ray.
Oh my God, get on it.
I know, and I've seen all the other Corman ones. What happens is this ends up being, and I don't know if this happens with you guys, but I have a stack of movies, and I'm like, oh, I'm going to watch these, but I don't want to see them while I'm doing anything else. And so I always want to put it on, but I'm working, so I leave it. But we're going to watch this.
You have to.
And I have been making a point of when I say I have to revisit it, I am revisiting it. So
that's right.
Spoiler for if we ever talk about it later, I'm just going to say it because you brought up, we talked about Community last time. I saw all of Community. I promised I'd get through a season. I got through all of it. So I am making a point of, if I say I have to revisit it, it's not going into a black hole where I will never see it. So I will see humanoids from the deep.
This also has James Horner's first score.
Nice. Yeah, I mean, I've heard good things about it. It comes up all the time. It's just, for whatever reason, this is, a recent Corman gap anyway. Like I said, I saw it a while back, but I don't remember it.
First viewed on Betamax, taped off of HBO.
Wow.
Not my Betamax. I'm just saying, I never owned a Betamax. It was someone else who owned a Betamax, and we went over to their house and saw it ripped off of HBO.
Did the quality still look good and everything?
Well, I can only say that in the context of at that time. At that time, it looked perfectly fine.
We didn't know any better.
Nice.
Exactly.
I didn't know that there was a quality above VHS.
Yeah.
That was just it.
Yeah. Like, I don't know if people realize what it was like for us who grew up on VHS when DVD first came out. It was mind blowing.
Yeah, and we had just started getting into like widescreen, like letterbox presentations on movies didn't even start showing up till later in the VHS life cycle.
And then DVD came out, and I was like, what fresh magic is this?
You can't get cleaner than DVD. This is the clearest picture possible.
You guys are skipping over Laserdisc.
Oh, good point. Good point.
I only skip over it because it wasn't part of my life.
Yeah, no, I
When
mean,
you want your DVDs to be as big as a record.
well, I wasn't a Rockefeller, so I couldn't do Laserdisc.
Me neither.
Yeah, it was definitely out of budget.
But it did look great. No question.
And now we'll be able to see humanoids in 8K one day.
I hope so.
I don't know. Maybe it does make me sound older, but I don't know if these movies. I don't know if some of these movies can handle that much clarity. But we'll see. Maybe
if they showed this at a 10 o'clock show at my local theater during the COVID slow reopening, I would lose my shit. For $5 to see this on the big screen, humanoids from the deep, that'd be too much to handle.
Yeah, the dilemma, right?
Well, I'm hoping my drive-in marathon gets this or some others one of these days. There's a few I want to catch up on. Like I just got back from the drive-in not too long ago. And we did Evil Dead, and that was the first big screen Evil Dead screen for me. And you know what? And I'm contradicting myself. I'm allowed to change my opinion. I saw Evil Dead in 4K, and it was glorious.
Better than beta.
Yeah, so I mean, anyway, so I complain about things being in 8K, but when it's done right, if they don't completely scrub it and you still got some grain and whatnot, I'm all for it, I guess.
Oh man, I remember Evil Dead when it first came out on tape, like 83, maybe 84, something like that, and it was the glorious Thorn EMI clamshell case, like
nice.
yeah, the CIA, the kind that the CIA would keep their tapes in on the shelf, of classified.
Oh yeah,
Ooh, just wonderful. I miss packaging like that.
I actually started we're never going to get through our movie picks, but it's okay. I haven't talked to you guys in ages. I started picking up VHS tapes. I know people are collecting them, and I fell for it. And it wasn't just because I want to collect them. What I want to do is build a VHS, just a small VHS wall in my basement. And so I started getting, when I was in Florida, I may have mentioned this before on the podcast. When I was in Florida, I picked up a bunch of tapes, and I got Zombie in just this wonderful clamshell. Yeah. And I'm like, oh, that brings me back. So yeah, I ended up having them ship me. I'll have to remember the name of the place for next time, but it was this place in Tampa, I believe. And I ended up buying 40 or 50 VHS tapes. They were only a couple dollars, but they had The Shining, Alien, Phantasm, Creepshow, all that stuff. And I'm like, I can't bring these on the plane with me because it's about to come out. I'm like, can you ship them? So they just shipped me boxes of VHS tapes.
There's actually sorry, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
I was just going to say, there's actually I think I've mentioned the Mahoning Drive-In a couple of times before on here. They do an annual event called the VHS Fest, where they'll actually play movies. Most of them are really so bad they're good, shot on video movies. I actually saw Hack-O-Lantern, but they project VHS onto the screen. So they get a VCR going, they funnel that through the projector, and you're just watching these crappy shot on video movies on VHS the way they were meant to be seen.
Wow.
That sounds glorious.
It does. Oh, and before I forget,
go ahead.
The place I wanted to mention was Grindhouse Video in Tampa.
Okay.
Nice.
No, I was just going to mention about that Mahoney Drive-In. There was a documentary made about it, but I can't find it anywhere. Does anyone know if it's streaming online anywhere?
I remember. Yeah, I remember hearing about this, but I can't remember the name
of where it's streaming
or the name of the movie.
Any of it.
It's if you typed in Mahoney Drive-In documentary, you'd it would work, is what I'm saying.
Oh,
Derek will have to do some digging.
Yeah.
So through the Google.
I mean,
Derek, we trust you
makes
can
me
find
look
it.
like an asshole now. and if essentially saying, someone Google this for me.
Derek, find it for me.
Another grape.
Right. Get our fact checker on it.
If you're talking about the drive-in, the one that's in upstate PA, Mahoney won't get you what you need. It's Mahonig. It's MAHONIG.
No way, really?
Mm-hmm. Maybe that's why you're not finding it.
Oh, I apologize.
I have been wanting to go to that one because they have zombie marathons, and it's just I have two drive-ins that are a little closer, and it's like I haven't been able to do it. But I told you, Brian, that if they have a zombie drive-in next year, that we'll meet up and do that.
Definitely. I want to try and get up there this year. They've been really they're just kind of a great staple for genre stuff. They're, unless they're doing those VHS Fest, they do all their stuff in 35 millimeter. I got to see, I think my first trip up there was to see a double feature of John Carpenter with The Fog and The Thing. And it was just absolutely amazing. And it's always like a vent up there. When there's not a pandemic, they usually have beforehand people at a really old school snack bar with just the nachos and the stuff that you would expect to be in there. They have been open this summer. From what I've heard, they've been doing a really good job at taking precautions to make sure people are, keeping socially distant. So I'm hoping at some point this summer to be able to get up there and catch at least one movie up there.
I don't know if he likes zombies anymore, though, Jonathan. You'll have to ask him if he gets to talk about a certain movie that I think he wants to talk about. He got nauseous because there's some gnarly zombie action that goes on.
Oh no! Well, that may be a great segue into Brian. What's your pick?
Yeah.
And it's got to be this one.
Yeah. So, yeah, I guess I know which one I'm doing first.
Yes, you are.
I've been dreading talking about this for a couple of different reasons. The first of which is that I'm going to absolutely, like, I've been practicing saying the name of this movie all day, and I know I'm not going to say it right. Anthropophagus, I believe is how you say it. On the poster, it's also spelled Anthropophagus. It's also known as the Beast, and it's also known as the Grim Reaper. It is a 1980 Italian horror film. It didn't get to the States until 81, but I'm counting it. I know that goes against our rules about when things were released, but sue me.
There are no rules. You're good.
It's a new era.
So for those who aren't familiar, this isn't quite a zombie movie. This is actually just a straight up.
I was just nudging you that way.
So yeah, it's about this group of folks who go to this island off of Greece, and it's kind of this small town. Only a few people live there, but by the time our cast of characters get there, there's almost no one there because one of the residents who was in a boating accident with his family wound up eating them and developed a taste for flesh, kind of went feral, and now he just kind of hunts, kills, and eats all the people who show up at this island. And so this is a movie by Joe Diamano. It stars George Eastman, and that's, I guess, the screen name for an Italian fellow who I would try and pronounce his name, but I'm sure I would butcher that as well. There's only so many titles I can butcher tonight, but it's it's an interesting movie in that it's 90 minutes long, and I think 45 to 50 minutes of that is people just wandering around this island. It takes a little while for it to get going. And then once it does, it is one of the meanest movies I have seen in quite some time. It's definitely not going to be for everyone, because this is definitely a movie that features a cannibal reaching up into a pregnant woman, pulling the fetus out of her, and then eating said fetus. It is. I watched this movie in the middle of the afternoon. That was not what I was expecting to be seeing in the middle of the afternoon. So it was a little jarring. Warning for those who are going to see it. But yeah, if you like your exploitation grindhouse movies as sleazy and as over the top as possible, the last 10 minutes of this movie are definitely gonna do it for you.
See, this is one that I had a reevaluation on when I first saw it again on VHS years and years ago. I didn't think too much of it. When I saw it again fairly recently on Severin's Blu-ray, I liked it quite a bit better. First of all, it's a good-looking movie. It has an atmosphere to it, and it uses its location, I think, to great effect. I will agree with you. There is a lot of walking around, but I didn't find it slow. I've seen movies that have more action in them that seem slower than this to me. For some reason, just the last time I watched it, it caught me that way. But yeah, man, that the baby fetus munching scene. I mean, that's the stuff that cinema is made of right there.
Right. And then I do think it gives I almost don't want to spoil it, but actually, if you look at the poster's going to spoil it for you.
Sure.
The way the big bad goes out at the end is probably one of the best send-offs I've ever seen for the death of a bad guy at the end of a movie.
Without a doubt.
It sounds like this would be a good double feature with Cannibal Holocaust, another 1980 horror movie.
It's not as grim as Cannibal Holocaust.
Okay.
I actually was seeing it as kind of being a spiritual partner with like Burial Ground, just that kind of Italian bonkers horror with kind of like each one has a quote unquote that scene in capital letters. Burial Ground. We don't even need to get into what that scene is, but this one kind of, I don't know, they feel somewhat similar. I think Burial Ground for me hits a little bit better than this one, but I did have a lot of fun coming up with different ways to mispronounce the names. So I had Anthrophosphorus, Anthro-Snuffleupagus, and I think my favorite was Antflo and Uncle Gus.
Oh my God.
Like it. I like it.
Yeah,
and if this movie gives you a taste for George Eastman, check out a movie he did a few years later called Absurd, which is a lot better movie than this. Still, not quote unquote a good movie, but it's a lot of fun.
Yeah,
it's
I definitely think this movie and Burial Ground and Absurd. I mean, these movies are acquired taste for sure, but especially for a lot of our listeners, whether you're, looking to increase your horror IQ, or maybe you haven't heard of these before, or you want to get into, Italian horror movies. I mean, there's definitely, I would definitely hit up Daily Dead for some recommendations. I mean, obviously Fulci and Argento and whatnot, but, this is, I would say that, Italian cinema and Italian horror tends to be an area that not a lot of younger horror fans immediately gravitate to, right? There's so much content these days. But I would say you're doing yourself a disservice if you just dismiss it, that there is, and again, like I said, it's an acquired taste in some cases, but it is worth taking the time to say, what are they trying to do here? Why do so many people love these movies? And understand too, like in 1980, how absolutely disgusting this is. If this is, sickening you or Brian or whoever now, imagine the effect it had on people in 1980, and not just horror fans, but the general public. This is definitely one of the video nasties, and for good reason.
Oh, this is why I wanted a VHS player in the first place, was to see stuff that I wasn't going to see on the ABC movie of the week. No. Nor was I going to be able to go to the theater by myself to see it, even if it would play at our theater.
I think a couple of small tweaks on this one, and you could make it like an after-school TV special of the week.
There you go.
A moral lesson to be learned.
I would like to see you give it a shot, because that would be very entertaining, I think.
It's a good don't do drugs message.
Don't do flesh.
And I think the fun thing about some of these, we're going back to like VHS and some of these releases, is, and I like to stress, and maybe obvious for some of us, but there was no IMDb. Like, there was no way to catch some of these things. So like, these were the movies or to know definitively that this exists. Like, these are some of the movies that were like the stuff of legend. Like, these video nasties you'd hear about because your friends were talking about them, and because somebody who knew somebody had a tape and was going to bring it to your, to whether it's a sleepover or whatever the case is, or you found something at the VHS store that just came in. So, like I said, these movies had there was a different kind of, like, there was an underground quality to these movies.
Oh yeah, they had a real, cachet to them for sure. And like you said, we didn't know in the first couple of years even what a lot of these titles were, because Fangoria had just come out the year before. There was Famous Monsters, but Famous Monsters played, it certainly wasn't a transgressive magazine by the time Fangoria had come around. So they covered a lot of sci-fi or old monster movies, which is great. But if you wanted stuff that was current, that was Fangoria. So anytime I could get my hand on a Fangoria, that helped out a little bit at the video store, because Fangoria used to have the video eye of Dr. Cyclops, which would have a review a bunch of videotapes which had just come out. So that was a bit of a help. Other than that, what you were really going on was the marketing. How good was the box? Now, back at that time, a lot of them had great boxes, because it's hucksterism. They're trying to draw you in. It's not like they had any TV commercials on, right? And you very limited genre appeal as far as publications went. So they're selling you on that box art. I know they certainly were selling me, you know, when I saw the cover of Hell Night with Linda Blair reaching through the gate, you know, I'm like, yeah, we're taking that one home. And we're taking whatever came on the shelf. It was all new, right? Whether it was a movie from 1975 or had, you know, just come out in 80 or 81. It was all new, but box art was, you know, essential to getting a kid to pick up, you know, horror movies.
Especially because there's no trailers playing on like the Blockbuster TVs or like online. You can't just go online and watch or like try and look at any video evidence of the movie. It's all based on the illustration.
Yep. No, they sold you just based on the box. It's like, you know, I mean, I always remember the Dead Pit because it had that 3D artwork. I've mentioned that before, but that always stands out. And Popcorn, that was always a good one. But yeah, there were. I mean, yeah, you lived and died based on your art. But anyway, let's move on. And Derek, what's your 1980 pick?
Well, speaking of iconic artwork, I'm going to do a not so deep cut and be that basic guy and just I'm just going to say it, Friday the 13th. because probably because it's the most personal of all the horror movies that came out that year. It was one where my sister and I had just passed a Taekwondo belt test, and we were coming home, and it was October. And I'm sure I've told this story before on Corpse Club, but just in case. And my parents grabbed, it was like Halloween and Friday the 13th. And they said, well, which one? You can choose one. So we chose Halloween, thinking it was actually a different movie kind of. But then I remember being obsessed with like, I need to watch the other movie that we didn't watch. And so eventually went back, got it on VHS, and because this was right before like the whole DVD takeover, and then was never the same after that. So yeah, and I just think it really holds up well. I love, especially watching Halloween first. I really love that opening where you see it from Michael's point of view, and then this was like if we had seen those kills from Michael's point of view, like first person throughout the entire film, it felt like that's what Friday the 13th was doing. And I thought that was really cool because that was, to me, that was kind of like the creepiest moment of Halloween, was being in the killer's, like seeing it from their point of view, being in their shoes. So I really dug that about Friday the 13th. And I mean, yeah, that's, there's not much. I mean, what hasn't been said about this movie 40 years later?
Well, here's what I can say about it, because, you know, usually when we talk about this franchise, it gets really contentious between Scott and I, because usually we're duking it out over Scott's incorrect opinion about Part 7. But I think this is our opportunity to kind of come together a little bit, because if I remember correctly, Mr. Drebit, is the original, it is your favorite of the Friday the 13th, correct?
Yeah, definitely. Do I think it's the best one? Yeah, I think Part 4 is probably the best made one, but the original is my favorite. I mean, I saw it when I was 10, and it scared me shitless. Because I find it, and I still do, I think it's built more for suspense than straight up horror towards the end. But the other big factor for me, again, seeing it at 10, was seeing Tom Savini's magic at work. And this was the first time I had seen his work, and it was the first time I had seen a horror movie where the illusion to me looked completely real. I remember distinctly seeing the Kevin Bacon death for the first time and letting out a big whoa. Like, how is that done? You know, like, it was magic. It was like the old thumb and finger trick that you're pulling apart your finger, right? It's so simple, but when you're 10, all you see is the illusion. And it was just magical to me.
And that Kevin Bacon kill is also it's the perfect example of how good editing can
Yes.
is so responsible for pulling off that magic trick, because I've seen the versions of that where they let it go longer, like the extended version of that. And the extended version actually kills the illusion a little bit, because the different angle, you can really tell more that it's a prosthetic. So that original R-rated cut where it's just that quick poke
Boom,
up through the
boom.
neck, little splash of blood, go away. For all parties concerned, Kevin Bacon might as well be dead. That's how real that looks.
Yeah.
And one of the more shocking ones too, just the suddenness of it, because I'm thinking something's going to happen, but I'm not thinking it's going to happen like that when that scene goes down.
Yeah, and it's not just because it's a great effect. That's a great kill. That's a great moment that you do not see coming. And I think because it's been around for so long, and it's been followed by so many movies that are so many in its series that are so different from what it does, that I know it gets dismissed a lot. I know I've seen all the Friday the 13th rankings from people online, including myself, but a lot of people put this movie down lower on the list, and I don't get that.
There's something that I think that's really interesting about, when we look at these class ofs, when we talk about 1980s, there's a certain type of movie that I think comes to people's minds when you talk about 80s horror. There's a lightheartedness to it. There's more comedy, and then you can kind of look at the trends in the 90s and in the 2000s. What I always find funny is you kind of have the turn of the decade, is that, these movies are released in 1980, but these weren't made in 1980. And I think that especially some of the movies that we have here that were released around this time, The Shining, Friday the 13th, there's a very, and even, I was talking about Evil Dead before. Evil Dead might have been released in 81, but they filmed it in 79. There's a very 70s feel to it. There is more of a, we'll say classical now. At the time in the 80s, it wasn't, but they're very much of the 70s style of filmmaking. I do agree with you that, and the reason why this is among my favorite, and I do prefer the first four movies to the rest of the Friday the 13th, is because they feel more in line with that, I don't know, again, like you said, suspense, like that AIP style. And I do like that they focus, especially in the first one, like I said, more on the suspense. It is a murder mystery until the very end. Obviously, it becomes different as the franchise goes on. But yeah, I agree with you that I see this one ranked low, and I'm like, just because it doesn't have the hockey mask. I mean, I said, for me, if it's not number one, it's in the top three.
Yeah.
Or the sack head.
Yeah.
But yeah, and it's also, I think it has, of all the endings of all the Friday the 13th, the canoe shot, when you first see Jason, and it's like you've never seen Jason before, and it's Jason as a boy, which I think is even creepier. And it just it's just such a perfect cherry on that entire Sunday, because it's really is completely unexpected. Like you don't really, you don't, it's not like Friday the 13th part 3 where you're like, okay, there's going to be this big jump scare at the end and it's going to be adult Jason, and you kind of know what to expect. You're going from Mrs. Voorhees, and then all of a sudden you're like, wait, is there something supernatural here? Is it not just like a whodunit? Is this actually going to, become something else? And so kind of it's the perfect cliffhanger to leave the door open and just kind of messes with you in a good way.
And that still plays really well. My mom has never been a huge fan of slashers. We went to the drive-in, at least a few years back, and it was slasher folks. I'm like, come on, they're older ones. You'll be fine with it. And just watching, us sitting in the car watching the original Friday the 13th, and everything's playing, with the Kevin Bacon kill. She's turning away a little bit. She screamed out loud at the canoe scene. And it's like, this movie still, everything that they intended still plays so well today.
Yeah. Yeah. It doesn't play nice.
not too bad for a Halloween ripoff cash grab.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, exactly. So, okay. Well, I'm gonna go over. I'll talk about this quickly because we could go hours with just 1980, as we could tell for how long we've gone so far. But we'll talk about my pick for a little bit because I think it's interesting, and I'm going to double dip. I'm double dipping. I'm not even and this is more than basic. But yeah, I wrote about Empire Strikes Back, and I'm going to talk about Empire Strikes Back because this is a horror podcast, and you can see how I just keep pulling us back to sci-fi on Corpse Club.
I would also like to note to the listeners that we specifically got an email telling us not to do ones that had been written about already. So go ahead, Jonathan.
Yeah, and then I cheated. I was going to talk about, and maybe I'll still talk about it. I was going to talk about Death Ship, and then I'm like, I have no passion for it.
Wow.
Death Ship is a fun movie, but no, I want to talk about Empire Strikes Back because I watched it a few times recently, and I talked about what an interesting time I had watching. Obviously, you're listening now, we're in the middle of a pandemic. If you're listening to this later, we were in the middle of a pandemic. But it was really interesting to watch the Star Wars trilogy as comfort food, and to think about, and I was talking to Derek about this. I talk about this a bit in the article, but to think about like some of these themes of this trilogy and how well they kind of play to me now. And it's kind of like people are talking about how powerful Endgame is. And I agree, the Marvel's, Avengers Endgame is that just seeing them in this kind of post-apocalyptic world and how they all kind of get together, it resonates more now. And I think that, the original Star Wars trilogy and watching it again, maybe like I said, with pandemic eyes, and it's there are some things that really they do well throughout this. The focus on your friends, the focus on, once you find out that Leia and Luke are brother and sister, about, saving your family and, doing what's right in the face of the enemy and, what do you call it, and terrible odds. And so, just imagining, because I was, late to Empire, I was barely around for Jedi. But I was late to Empire, and just imagining what, when people saw it originally, what a downer that movie must have been, because there's very few movies, if you look back at, at sequels, there's not very many that just end. On Her Majesty's Secret Service is the one that really comes to mind. I keep going back to that. If I want to think about downer movies in a franchise, like that Bond one where they kill his wife at the end, with George Lazenby. I mean, I'm okay with that. How many years has it been? Come on now.
Yeah, I've seen the spoof version of that, but don't ruin it for me now.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, that was a downer enough that they kind of rebooted that, and we got, we got Sean Connery in Diamonds Are Forever. And so, there's not too many movies where they just they put your heroes through the ringer, and this one really does it. But it does. They do such a great job of taking some of the themes and flipping it, because this definitely feels like Star Wars. And I'm reminded kind of I was talking to Derek about this with the Last Jedi, and there was so much back and forth when that one came out, and but that movie as well had such strong themes. And when you look at this, it's like, these are what these movies are powered by. Yes, the special effects were great. Yes. There's a huge collectible, there's a huge collectible world and a fan base around it. But I think that really what works here, and what, we wouldn't have without Empire Strikes Back, is we need that idea that, the heroes don't always win. And I'm so thankful that we have this to kind of inform sequel structure, because, you can see this through, the last, 30, 40, whatever years of sequels, that it's okay that your heroes don't always win. That it's okay to, end on a downer note, because there's going to be another adventure, because we can give our heroes a chance to win in the next installment. So anyway, I don't know if you guys have had a chance to see it, or if you guys have picked up Disney Plus, but definitely I would suggest revisiting the original trilogy.
Never heard of it. But this is why I say Phantasm is the Star Wars of the horror series, because every Phantasm movie ends like The Empire Strikes Back.
So it's the middle movie in the trilogy, every movie.
Every movie.
It's 5 Empire Strikes Back.
That's right.
As the tall man looms in the distance. Yeah, I think it was refreshing too, because A New Hope almost could be a standalone movie, as far as it's such a complete story, and it's like, the classic big explosion, everyone's celebrating at the end. It almost feels like the last movie in a trilogy rather than the first movie. And then The Empire Strikes Back just kind of is total opposite, like a little less cleanly structured, but as far as that classic kind of hero's journey in that movie. But I think it works, and I think that's intentional. But yeah, I think I still prefer A New Hope as like my favorite complete Star Wars movie, just because I just love how much they put in that movie, and the assault on the Death Star is, I think, for me, is like one of the pinnacles of that entire franchise. But I really appreciate what Empire does and how gutsy it was to do that, especially considering it was almost so dark that they like over course corrected with like bringing in the Ewoks and stuff in Return of the Jedi. But I think that also has a lot of cool stuff as well, and it felt like you almost need an antidote to how like grim Empire was. So it's a really interesting, like, it's almost like the magnetic core of that original trilogy, where everything kind of like the first movie and the third movie, aka the fourth and the sixth movie, for those keeping track at home, are affected almost like by how grim that middle movie gets.
Yeah, and I think our time markers in life, I think, have a lot to do with the perspective on this too. Because I saw Empire when I was a kid, probably about 11, and I wasn't crazy about it. And then when Return of the Jedi came out in '83, I saw that when I was 13 in the theater, and I loved it, and I liked it way better than Empire, because at 11 I wasn't ready for that kind of sci-fi movie, or it wasn't what I wanted from my Star Wars. Now, of course, looking back years later, I mean, Empire is my favorite Star Wars movie out of any of them, other than The Last Jedi, I think, is kind of vying for that spot. But yeah, there's lots of great, very humanistic, simple lessons or takeaways that you can get from the Star Wars movies, and they're always uplifting.
And I think that, part of why Empire is particularly good for what we're going through right now is because I think it works for people at kind of who are in different mental states with everything going on with the pandemic. Like, Jonathan, I loved how you turned looking at Empire into kind of a rallying cry for like, yeah, we're at kind of a down spot. We're in a valley right now. But that doesn't mean it needs to be the end of it. We're kind of in Empire right now, and so, there are things we can do to get ourselves to that riding off into the sunset.
Yeah, Derek, we want those Ewoks.
Hey, I want that Ewok party. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, I love the Ewoks too.
No, you're not invited, Derek. No,
what?
Sorry.
Come on, I've been playing Ewok Hunt on Star Wars Battlefront, so I mean, I'm ready.
Whatever. Yeah, nub, mother effer.
But there's also, something to be said for, part of mental health is allowing for yourself, when you need to kind of wallow in things that are sucky. And this year, I think most of us can agree, has been a big pile of suck. So if you need to kind of wallow in that, you're maybe coming into Empire with more of like, it's like that argument they have in Clerks where Dante is like, it ends on such a down note, and that's all that life is, a series of down notes. So it's like, Empire works for kind of both those angles. It's either like, yeah, this is kind of our temporary valley where, we'll get to that Ewok party eventually, or it's like, yeah, this is just another in a series of crappy things that are happening. So either way, I think like right now, that's kind of I would guess the entry from Star Wars that is probably going to resonate with most people right now.
Wallowing in Suck is the name of my autobiography.
It's funny because I was watching The Great Outdoors last night, and then the boat was called Suck My Wake.
Oh my God.
Just thought I'd throw that out there.
Yeah, for me, Star Wars was a good watch. I mean, especially like I said, during all of this, watching the trilogy all over again is like it made me think about, the first time I watching this as a little kid. And like I said, as I was writing the article, it's like, how would 8-year-old Jonathan handle this if I was like, hey, like, you're 36-year-old you is in the middle of a pandemic, well, are you doing the best you could? Are you taking care of people? Are you being a hero? Like that's how 8-year-old Jonathan would probably react to it.
And it's interesting you mentioned that because my cousin Gunnar is a huge Star Wars fan, and he got Disney Plus, so he's been watching all of them for the first time, and then he's been asking me, like, what trilogy is your favorite? What movie is your favorite? So I feel like I need to go back and rewatch like all of them just to evaluate it and give an honest answer, because it's been a while since I've watched some of those.
My 8-year-old would say, "Are you going to eat that hot dog?" Because my 8-year-old really liked hot dogs,
and my 8-year-old would be talking through the bite of hot dog, saying, "Yes, I am."
Yeah.
And I will say, then I'll take us out of Star Wars. I promise. I have changed my opinion significantly on, and especially in the pandemic, on The Last Jedi. When I saw it in theaters, I was like, eh. And, I recognize there was, good filmmaking at work, but as I've watched it more and more, and then especially after seeing like the new trilogy completed, like not only do I really like what Rian Johnson's doing there, I think there are some maybe story or character missteps that don't work throughout the entire trilogy. But I really do. I do think now I more highly rate, and I put The Last Jedi way high up on the list of my favorite Star Wars movies. I love the idea, and even though they don't carry that through to Rise of Skywalker, I love the idea that they play with, one, that your heroes are not always going to be heroes, kind of playing off of Empire Strikes Back, but also that anyone can be a hero. It's not about your lineage, and I think that is really powerful now. It doesn't matter where you come from. It doesn't matter how much money you have. It doesn't matter what position you or your family have. Like, you can be a hero. You can choose to be a hero at any time. I think that's really powerful stuff. Unless,
of course, J.J. Abrams comes in, kicks all of that in the nuts, and then just turns everything into nostalgia porn.
It's unbelievable.
All right, now it's gonna get away. It's gonna get away from you.
But I have a way to bring us back. The time machine just
discourse.
The time machine's just glitching. Hold on. Guys, I'll get us back. I'll get us back to 1980.
I got the time. Feel free to at me. At Evil Taylor Hicks. Rise of Skywalker sucked.
But I think I can get us back. Okay. So I think what's going to get us back here, and I know everyone's super enthusiastic about this, is we are going to talk about Billboard's year-end Hot 100 singles of 1980.
This is my sweet spot, baby.
Can you do it in your Casey Kasem voice?
Yeah, exactly.
So for number one, the number one song of 1980. Number one
song of 1980
is "Call Me" from Blondie.
Nice.
We also have "Another Brick in the Wall" Part 2 from Pink Floyd, or Pink Floyd. That works too. What else? We have "Rock with You" from Michael Jackson. We have "Crazy Little Thing Called Love" from Queen. "It's Still Rock and Roll to Me" from Billy Joel.
Yeah.
I'm skipping around a little bit.
Add that album.
"Cruisin'," Smokey Robinson.
Great song.
Yeah, let's see what else we have. "Babe" from Styx.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Babe, I'm leaving. I must be on my way.
Also, the first album from Loverboy, released in 1980 with "The Kid Is Hot Tonight" and "Turn Me Loose."
Derek knows what's up.
He does.
I couldn't resist. For our Calgarian on the horn with us.
That's right.
Is it Calgarian? Is that how you would say it?
It sounds like something from Game of Thrones or Star Wars, but
Yeah, no, you got it.
Yes.
I believe the word you're looking for is hoser.
and we have You May Be Right from Billy Joel.
Yeah, it's a great
Wow,
album.
that was a good year
Glasses.
for him.
Yeah, it was.
That is a great album.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
So we have all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
Sarah from Fleetwood Mac, Deja Vu from Dionne Warwick, Heartbreaker, Pat Benatar.
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
I do think that is like the sweet spot of at least of rock, as far as like what I listen to is all in that late 70s to mid 80s. Like just, it was a magical time, even though I wasn't around for it.
Great stuff. Record stores were just as magical as video stores.
Oh, gosh. Yeah, yeah.
Rows and rows of tapes, rows and rows of cassettes.
Wow.
Well, you mentioned Pink Floyd. That reminds me of one of the greatest concerts I've ever been to. And granted, this definitely wasn't in 1980, but I got to see Roger Waters do the entirety of The Wall in Philadelphia. That was probably the best concert experience I've ever had in my life.
Wow. Did they have like some light shows and stuff with it too, like with the stage?
Oh, Derek, it was so much more than a light show. Like this was like just a complete multimedia thing. They literally, as it was going, like built a wall in the middle of the stage. And of course they had a big inflatable floating pig. And of course, because it was Philadelphia, the crowd got a hold of it and tore it to pieces because Philadelphia can't have nice things.
That does sound amazing though.
It was a blast. It was so great.
Gosh. Yeah, there's a lot of music from that time. You know, you still hear, obviously with the classic rock stations and everything, but it just seemed like you mentioned Blondie and a lot of these acts like still very relevant today. Mm-hmm. Still referenced in movies today, even though I know we're kind of having like an 80s revival and now it's kind of shifting to 90s revival in film, but it feels like some of that stuff really is timeless.
Also makes me think of in Monty Yazzi's entry on Flash Gordon. I was very surprised to hear that Queen was not their first choice. The director wanted Pink Floyd, and like as much as I love Pink Floyd, there was no one but Freddie Mercury who was going to pull off the theme song from Flash Gordon.
No, you needed them for that.
Yeah, the energy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it would have been a little different with Pink Floyd. I would love to, if they had like recorded a demo or something, that would have been interesting just to hear that version. But yeah, Queen is the ultimate version of that.
It wouldn't have been as peppy, that's for sure.
A little more mellow.
Yeah. And if we look at top television in 1980,
what do we got?
have Dallas. We found out who shot JR.
Man, oh man, that is an amazing show. I beg everyone out there, if you can find it on like DVD for like cheap, watch the Dallas series. It's fantastic.
So is that something, do you remember the whole Who Shot JR thing, like in its first run? Like, was that?
No, I remember the phenomena happening. I wasn't into watching Dallas.
Okay.
Then not until much later on did I realize what goofy fun Dallas is. But I remember the hoopla at the time. Oh yeah, it was splashed across every copy of TV Guide and People magazine, and it was on all the talk shows and everything. Yeah, it was a big deal.
Wow. See, for me, it was Who Shot Mr. Burns, but that was a little bit later.
But that was actually, it's funny you mentioned that. That was my introduction to the concept of television seasons, because I didn't understand why like 4 months went by before you got to find out who shot Mr. Burns.
Yeah, that is true, where you actually had to wait a little bit.
Or what other shows were there, Jonathan?
I mean, CBS was really ruling the everybody's television viewing. We had Dukes of Hazzard on CBS in Dallas as well. We had 60 Minutes. We had MASH. Then The Love Boat on AMC, and The Jeffersons on CBS, Alice on CBS, House Calls on CBS, Three's Company, Little House on the Prairie, One Day at a Time, Real People, Archie Bunker's Place, Magnum P.I., Happy Days.
Oh my God, guys, have you seen that clip floating around on Twitter of a woman sicking her parrot on Tom Selleck in Magnum P.I.?
Yeah.
No,
That's the greatest thing I've ever seen in my life. And then it flies up. It flies up into the rotors of a helicopter propeller. Yeah, I will send that to you ASAP, Jonathan.
Oh yeah.
Sounds good.
Good stuff. I think I was probably a CBS mostly.
It sounds like most people were.
Yeah, CBS was really popular. NBC was off the chart. They were still in the dead. They were in the dead zone until basically until Family Ties and Cosby came along. So no one watched NBC at the time, that's for sure. But CBS had all the great sitcoms like One Day at a Time and Jeffersons and All in the Family, and had stuff like Magnum, which was just fantastic.
Yeah, so that was TV and music in 1980. We got to move back to our movie picks because, I mean, Corpse Club listeners, if you want to stay here for 3 hours, we'll be here with you. But we'll see if we can keep this under 3 hours. So let's see. We'll mix it up. Brian, I'll have you go first.
Cool. So this isn't strictly horror, but it's definitely kind of genre adjacent. And
I mean, we can cheat here. It's okay.
I'm cheating. And
Empire.
I'm also cheating in the other direction in terms of the release date. This was released in 1979 originally in the great country of Australia.
What is happening here?
It came out in the
This
U.S.
is anarchy.
It came out in 1980 in the U.S. And this is George Miller's very first entry to the Mad Max series with Mad Max. An interesting fun fact about this movie for me is that I went a good chunk of my life without realizing this movie existed. For me, I always thought that the Mad Max series was just The Road Warrior and Beyond Thunderdome. I had no idea there was this initial entry in the series. So by the time I got to it, it was actually like, it was almost watching like a prequel for Mad Max to find out like how he turned into, how he goes from being what's his full name, Max Rockatansky, to Mad Max. And I think, part of what I appreciate, I think the biggest thing I appreciate about this movie, other than the fact that it, it goes back to a simpler time before we knew what a bigoted piece of crap Mel Gibson is. It also represents, can any of you name me a series that has gone on as long and has been overseen by the same person as Mad Max with George Miller? I mean, we're going 40 plus years.
Brian.
I know Brian. Shut up. But yes, there's the Phantasm series, but he didn't, Don Coscarelli didn't direct the last one. So this is the only series I can think of that every single entry is the same person. And there might be another one. I mean, aren't they still talking about there's going to be like a fifth one in production?
Sure.
So,
so they're tied with Phantasm because Phantasm has 4 directed by Coscarelli and Mad Max has 4 directed by George Miller.
So if he does this next one, then he's going to have a fifth one. And
I can't believe I'm sitting here having to defend Don Coscarelli.
You're not defending anything.
I'm getting the vapors over here.
I'm just enjoying this. I got my popcorn.
It's like a Frito moment here.
This is no shade against Mr. Coscarelli. You know I love him. We've had many a discussion about this.
This is your Frito moment.
And it's also just like this movie, like I said, the original one, for me, it's kind of the prequel. It's the origin story for Mad Max. And it's kind of interesting to see this dystopia in Australia that's not quite completely engulfed in kind of the post-apocalypse of the oil wars or whatever it is that kind of drives it into the ground. So it's just really interesting seeing this as kind of like the precipice for everything that's going to come next.
Yeah, it is interesting because like you mentioned, I think growing up, it always seemed, because it was on TV a lot more, and just because it's referenced in pop culture a lot more, that Mad Max 2, aka the Road Warrior, in my mind always seemed like the first movie. And then I was like, oh yeah, there is this other film that just seems to get overshadowed by Road Warrior and Beyond Thunderdome. And this was before Fury Road came out and kind of like reignited a lot of interest in the franchise, or introduced a lot of people to the franchise. But and it's funny because the movie, like, I think because you actually see how Max becomes who he is in the Road Warrior, and it's a very somber story. It's not nearly as over the top. I mean, there's definitely some over the top like characters, but it's really subdued actually compared to anything else in the franchise. And I think that really caught me off guard the first time I watched it, and just watching like Max's life, his friends, his family, like his whole world basically just be taken away piece by piece throughout the film. It's like, oh, okay, so this is how he becomes, this is how he loses his humanity and almost becomes like a shell of a human being. And so I think it's really important to go back and watch that. And I had seen the Road Warrior and like Beyond Thunderdome just because they were on TV so much. I had to go, I think the only way I could watch Mad Max was like it happened to be free, like on demand, like as one of their monthly movies that like Xfinity would put on there. So I was able to watch it that way finally. But it really, like, I don't know, it was just really interesting to see Max before kind of all this other hoopla enters the picture, for lack of a better word, and to watch like just a more quiet kind of movie. And then with some really still badass like car chase scenes and everything, but the world hasn't entirely gone to crap yet, which is interesting in that film because you're so used to equating Max with the full on post-apocalypse. And it's kind of like you said, it's like a prequel film, but it's still like the first film in the franchise.
Yes. This is actually
Considering
I got there.
It's funny, one of the first things I did when I made a Facebook profile was take a quote from Mad Max and put it like on my wall because I thought, oh, that's kind of cool, that's kind of edgy. And it was like something about his best friend like being so full of life he could build a franchise on it or something like that. And so yeah, I guess I have more of a relationship with that movie than I expected.
And I think Scott got real quiet because he's still feeling very injured over this whole George Miller versus Don Coscarelli thing, and I admit I think I framed this the wrong way because it's I framed it as a competition where it's actually more just like these two guys actually have very similar trajectories in terms of they both had movies that first came out in 79 and then they kind of keep coming back with entries to it, but it's always been theirs. So it's and the quality kind of shows. These are two franchises that, with a lot of franchises that go past 2 or 3, you're going to see a big dip. But with both Phantasm and with Mad Max, I don't think you see that dip. And, obviously, I think a lot of people would say that with Fury Road, that's probably the best one that Miller's done in this series. But, yeah, it all goes back for both of these guys to go back to 1979. And in this case, it goes back to something that's a little bit, more subtle, which is interesting because this original one is coming out as kind of like the Ozploitation boom of the late 70s, early 80s. So the fact that after the entries that have come, that this one is the most kind of subtle and toned down, it just kind of an interesting trajectory this has made over the past 4 decades.
Now, while I love and appreciate the tap dancing, I was being quiet because I'm not the biggest Mel Gibson fan anymore.
Oh yeah.
So I don't really have a lot to add to the discourse, as it were. But that's me. When it comes to Mel, I just kind of keep my mouth shut. Otherwise, we would have all of the advisory warnings on this episode.
And I say this fully well knowing, like, I am no longer a Mel Gibson fan myself, and that one hurts because I used to be a really big fan of pretty much anything he would put out, from the 80s and early 90s. But you just kind of can't. There's a certain kind of, like, if some people just kind of turned out to be kind of a-holes, then, sometimes you can make that separation of just like, well, I can still enjoy the stuff, but it's not really something that that his behavior allows for. You can't really make that separation. So Scott, I totally get that.
It's and also a personal thing. It's a personal thing. If someone else watches his movies, my wife still watches his movies. Mm-hmm. Have at her. That's none of my business, nor should it be.
Well said.
I was just gonna say the same. It's like, and let's just move on. But no. It's the separating the art from the artist. In some cases, it's easier to do. In some cases, it's not. Depends on the person. I didn't think about it, but I really haven't revisited these since, or any Mel Gibson movie. So I really didn't think about it, kind of until you mentioned it, Scott. And I mean, I guess that's there even from a subconscious level with me. I love Fury Road, and I do love what George Miller's been able to do with the series. I've been actually racking my brain trying to think of another creator that fits the bill, and that not only has had, control of their franchise for so long, but, like you said, their best movie was the most recent one. So yeah, anyway, let's move on. Who am I going to go with? I'm trying to see how I want to do this. I'm just buying time because I have no idea what I'm going to pick for mine. Derek, you're up.
All right. So instead of doing something more, I guess, apparent or basic or not as a deep cut, I'm going to cheat a little on this pick and do something that Heather wrote about. It was included in Heather's really excellent piece on Jamie Lee Curtis movies from 1980, because that really was the year that Jamie Lee Curtis dominated this horror cinema and the box office, and just was in 3 horror movies, which is really awesome. One of those 3 that really sticks with me is Prom Night. And I know I also love The Fog, and Terror Train has all sorts of charm and some really good, awesome costumes. But Prom Night sticks with me.
Pew, pew, Prom Night. Pew, 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 pew.
Exactly. That's why. I
want that as my ringtone. Yeah, we can make it happen now. We can just cut that. We can make it.
There's a Corpse Club exclusive. But this movie, it's I don't know, it's just everything I wanted out of a movie in that era, because it's so all over the place, but in the best possible way. I mean, you have kind of this recurring theme where there's this horrible accident in amongst a group of friends in their childhood, and then years later this comes back to haunt them, which is a theme that we've seen so many times in horror cinema, particularly in a lot of the slashers. That's a recurring theme. But then they just go so off the wall in the whole leading up to the prom, and then just the dancing, so much dancing. I mean, it was the Prom Night theme song. Just I quote this movie so much just because of that theme song with the prom night. Everything is all right. I mean, that's just good stuff.
There's your ringtone.
And then it's just on that loop, and you almost forget you're watching a horror movie at times. I mean that as a compliment, just because it is so all over the place. But it's grounded, as Heather mentioned, it is grounded by a really solid performance by Jamie Lee Curtis, who's coming off that Halloween high, and she's riding that wave, and she's still turning in really awesome performances. And then Leslie Nielsen, who I know that so for me, Leslie Nielsen, when I saw Prom Night, I just thought of him as Naked Gun, Airplane, like really all these comedy roles. And I know he had done more serious stuff before he did those films, but for me, that's what I had seen him in. So then to watch him play like a really more serious role, like I kept waiting for him to crack jokes and everything. And when he didn't, I was like, oh, this is different for him. Like I really, it kind of took me by surprise, and it kind of made me seek out some of his earlier roles and kind of look at his filmography a little differently. So yeah, Prom Night. And then he got Slick. I mean, there's all sorts of characters in this movie, but for me, it's the music that I go back to it for, because
it's a very Canadian. It's a very Canadian movie too. All the cast is Canadian, or most of the cast is Canadian, I should say.
Well, yeah.
Paul Lynch, who went on to watch the unwatchable Humongous, and I say unwatchable because he didn't hire a lighting director, and you can't see a damn thing in the movie. He directed this one as well. This is one, again, from my childhood that I had a dubbed copy of it that I owned, and would watch over and over again.
Really?
Yeah. This one we watched quite a bit. And I think that was more of just like a repetition thing, because I've watched it within the last few years, and it's really tame. I think it's a little too tame. It kind of is a bit of an anomaly for the era, you know. So yeah, but it's still it's I think for a lot of people it's one of those comfort slashers, right?
Yeah.
You grab it from the shelf, you throw it on, and you can just chill for 90 minutes. I think Leslie Nielsen should be their granddad, and not their dad. So he's a late daddy apparently. But yeah, no, Prom Night is fun.
Yeah, and I love, the use of the disco music. This is like right around that time when disco was about to fall off the cliff, and like disco, it was like kind of felt like almost like a farewell letter to that a little bit, because disco would be dead soon after this, but it was like clinging to that late 70s, like
sure. Well, like Jonathan was saying, that's when it was filmed, right? So they're thinking disco's gonna last forever.
Soundtrack is gonna be killer.
Little did they know.
Little did they know.
And I think something I always remember about that movie, and I don't think I imagined this, is that there's the scene where the van goes off of a cliff and explodes. And I don't know if it was just the scan that I had on the film, or maybe I blinked at the wrong moment, but I always saw like the van exploding before it hits the ground. Like, I don't know if that was intentional or not.
That's the Paul Lynch specialty, right?
So it's the moments like that, like you said, it's like comfort food cinema. And for that reason, it's my second pick.
Okay, well, we're 2 down, 2 to go. And Scott.
All right, I'm gonna class up the joint a little bit here. Ooh. with Graydon Clark's Without Warning.
Ooh.
Has anyone watched this yet?
I have not seen it.
It's been on my Scream Factory released this, right, on Blu-ray.
Did you watch it or not? Just answer the question.
It's in the to watch pile.
No, I saw this one.
Oh,
so
good.
So know that.
I mean, technically, if we want to.
All right, half of us have seen it at least, so that's good. Anyway, this movie was shot by Dean Cundy. Has David Caruso in an early role, has Martin Landau and Jack Palance in later roles, and has an alien that is pretty much the prototype for the Predator.
Oh, wow.
This movie played in the theater and then never had a home release at all. Until Scream Factory put it out on DVD and Blu-ray. It never came out on video. Yeah, it was one of those notorious lost movies, right? It was like
Really?
it was like, did you see it? No, I never did see it. Have you seen it? No, I didn't see it. That you always heard about but never saw.
Huh.
I think it's much better than if people associate a certain type of movie with Graydon Clark, it's usually cheap and cheesy. And I would say this is certainly that, but having Dean Cundey shoot it, it has a really good look to it for its budget. And you get fun performances from Martin Landau and Jack Palance, and some decent effects. And it's a really good time. And now that it is out there on Scream Factory, I think everyone should check it out.
Well, I think this is what Scream Factory really is. This is what sets them and companies like Severance like that apart. And this is really, this is what they do that's really great for the horror community. Yes, they're re-releasing things like, the Friday the 13th series. Very excited for that. They did Halloween 2 and 3 as some of their early releases. Yes, they need some of those big ones. But being able to take some of these horror gems that in some cases people just remember flashes of them, right? You might remember flashes of them from seeing them in the theater or
on a compilation,
or for others, people who are just maybe made it to VHS but not DVD. So you remember seeing them as a kid, but they're able to take these movies and give them such attention and care and so I love stories like this because this is not just re-releasing a movie. This is preserving genre history.
Yeah.
And this is I think it's for me it's required watching. I think definitely you should support movies like this that are given new life on Blu-ray.
Here.
Yeah. Wow, and then Kevin Peter Hall plays.
Correct.
Oh my gosh. Well, no wonder. I mean, there's a Predator connection right there. Yes,
there is.
How could a movie like this be lost to time when it has a cast like that?
I don't know. We've all seen many, 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 many worse pictures than this to get a VHS and a DVD and probably a special treatment Blu-ray.
Don't you think this would have just killed at like Blockbuster if they had put this with that cover art on the shelf?
For sure.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, I mean, in a lot of cases, it comes down to rights, and and some of these, whether it's Scream Factory or other specialty labels, they have to do a lot of digging. There's a lot of legal hurdles to overcome. Maybe it's something that gets held up, like rights to the music, right? Or maybe it's there's two people who claim they have rights to it, and so it's easy when you have. What do you call it? Like larger ownership over a library of titles, right? We can release, you can license, from the MGM catalog, and obviously they have hundreds and hundreds of horror movies. And, same with Fox and Warner. But, some of these other ones, depending on what companies get acquired or go out of business or what deals were in place back in the day, they may still prevent things from, reaching home media.
Wow. Yeah, that is amazing. It's funny though, because like we were talking about, you had to wait 3-4 years to see Star Wars back in the day, but this, it's like, well, how about 35 years? That's just amazing.
Yeah, and there are so many movies too that are lost to time. There are movies that showed at the drive-in that people will never see again because either whether it's rights or in most cases they don't exist anymore. People don't know where they are.
Mm. Yeah, so you really, that's just encouragement to go see movies because you just don't know.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that was a good pick. So we're gonna move on to my 1980 pick, and because almost everybody else. First of all, I do need to say this, Scott. I don't think you broke any of the rules that I'm aware of. Not only did you follow the rules, but you were a shining example of the rules for future podcasters to follow.
Thanks.
Future generations.
Yes.
Thank you.
So I just want to say that. So you get a virtual gold medal And I've broken all of them. I'm going to continue to do it. So,
Jonathan, if you do The Shining, I'm going to be very upset.
Literally, I almost did, but I didn't. So I was like, well, what am I going to talk about? And I'm like, oh no, I know what I'm going to talk about. And so I am going to talk about 1980s, The Dark Phoenix Saga, which is not a movie.
Wow.
In
like
1980,
the comic book run. Is that when it first came out?
In 1980,
Wow.
one of the most important comic book runs, certainly for Marvel, but many people would argue, of all time, was the Dark Phoenix Saga by Chris Claremont and John Byrne. If you haven't read it, and I would say that a lot of younger comic book readers probably haven't, right? There's a lot of entertainment to catch up with. So I definitely, as you always hear me say on Corpse Club, like I'm not like, you're not a real horror fan if you haven't done this or watched this, or you're not a comic book fan if you haven't read this. I understand that there is so much of a backlog. And so that's why I highlight things like this. And I think the Dark Phoenix Saga, if you only saw Dark Phoenix, the movie that came out, it just doesn't do this justice. If you saw, what was it, X-Men 3, it doesn't do the story justice. This was, the definition of game changer. When we think about, it's amazing to me because, obviously people, who are in their teens now or who are just being born now, they'll see like the Marvel movies and they'll be like, oh, this is no big deal. Like we're in space and there's movies where like superheroes can like go back and forth and time travel. But like, this was like the Infinity War of its time, because they were able to, take the X-Men who had, maybe more grounded stories. Obviously, we know the X-Men tends to go in crazy sci-fi areas on Earth, but this really took it into other areas, took it literally into space, and had just this incredible story that lasted from January to October in 1980, and covered Jean Grey, Phoenix, becoming this Dark Phoenix, this uncontrollable power that is responsible, for killing millions or billions of lives. And it's how did the X-Men deal with this? How did those that love her deal with this? How does Professor X deal with the fact that there is now a governing body out in space that wants to execute her? And like I said, this really is the definition of epic, and it still holds up well. I found myself revisiting more comic books lately. I was talking about some of the things that I've been doing as opposed to just watching, horror movies. And it's because, and one of the things is comics. I've been reading, rereading Dark Knight Returns, The Long Halloween. And I mean, those aren't exciting. Those aren't happy ones either, right? But for some reason, I found myself gravitating more towards comics. And so if you have Comixology or Amazon, I think that whether it's Amazon Unlimited, I forget what it's called, or the Marvel subscription as well is a really great value. I'd suggest taking a stop at the Dark Phoenix Saga and reading through that and just seeing how incredible and influential that it is.
I'm like almost crying over here because this is literally the only comic book run that I know and that I did. Literally, when we moved to Jamaica in February of 80, I was at the store and they had some comics there and I grabbed, so I would have missed, no, it would have been the January issue probably. But I got hooked on it, and every month I had to get the next comic in this series because I was completely blown away. I don't know why it didn't lead to a full-blown love of other superhero comics, but I was like so on board for the Dark Phoenix saga. It was incredible.
I actually, thinking about it, I think one of the best adaptations we've had is the X-Men cartoon, which is
the 90s one, right?
So you were probably exposed to that, Derek. But the cartoon is actually a pretty good translation of the comic book series.
Yeah, the 90s for superhero cartoons was just a treasure trove. I mean, you had Batman, the animated series, X-Men, Spider-Man. So you had some Gargoyles. Well, that was its own thing. But yeah, you had some really good comic book adaptations, and X-Men set the bar early because they were one of the first coming in at the early 90s, and they did like it was a very season 3 was the one where they adapted this, and they did like a 4-part Dark Phoenix saga, and then before that they did a 5-part Phoenix saga. So season 3 really revolved around it. But yeah, I do remember that as a kid being like, whoa, this is some next level stuff. Like, this is really intense, because you're not always expecting that from a cartoon at the time. But then that decade really like took things in darker directions in the animated form. So that was a huge eye opener for me. And that kind of like got me into X-Men, because I always liked going back and reading the back issues from like the 80s and the 70s, and getting the paperback collections of the 60s, some of the early stories. But yeah, Dark Phoenix was always such a really pivotal story. It was kind of right up there with some of the darker like Spider-Man things, like when he grows like 8 arms and stuff like that. But this was even more creepy too. So yeah, they did a really good job at that.
And you know what John Byrne is, Derek?
John Byrne. Gosh, I should. That name sounds so familiar.
Well, he was the artist on.
Oh, okay. So what else did he?
Well, he's a Calgarian.
Well, there you go. Oh my gosh, you get all the great ones, Scott.
Yeah, all the great ones.
It all comes back to Calgary.
That's right.
Paul Dean and Loverboy, and then John Byrne from X-Men.
And me.
And Scott.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, it's got to be Scott. Scott's on the top of that list.
Daily
well, I'm the only one of those people on the call. So throw me a bone.
If we brought any other Calgarians on the list, though, you'd have priority.
Okay,
you have nice seniority.
Okay,
yeah.
Good to know.
You're a card carrying Corpse Club member.
It's true.
So
literally,
Jonathan or anybody who has seen the film adaptations, I've seen X3. I haven't seen Dark Phoenix just because everything I heard about it said it was very middling, so I didn't bother. Why do you think they have such a hard time adapting that for a film? Is it just because it's trying to condense too much into one thing? Because X3 was so very bad. Like, it was.
I'm gonna try to keep this condensed so that we don't spend the next hours. But it really comes down to the allegedly the Fox executive teams at the time. And, I think one of the great things about X-Men in the comics then and the comic book run they have now is really excellent. Is that X-Men is, it can go into deep sci-fi. It is not super grounded. And as it continues, it becomes more sci-fi. And so you have different timelines, you have Days of Future Past. You have things with the Sentinels, you have Apocalypse. You have just all of these great fantastical characters. And I understand that back when they were first launching these franchises, it was like, well, we have to make them accessible to a casual audience. So we have to ground it in reality. But there were many cases where the filmmakers wanted to introduce Sentinels back in the early films, or the Brood, and they didn't let them. And when it came to, well, how do we do Dark Phoenix? It's how do we do Dark Phoenix on Earth? I don't even think beyond the fact that the original intention of the filmmakers was probably, how can we get out into space? Can we have the Shi'ar Imperial Guard, and can we deal with that? And can we introduce that? Because I mean, it's like I said, it's definitely high sci-fi. They definitely go into space. They're definitely dealing with multiple races of aliens, and we get a little bit more of that in the new one. But like I said, it was too crazy for them to pull off. If anything, one of the great things about the MCU is that they've proven that slowly you can introduce these things, and now we can go crazy sci-fi with it. Guardians of the Galaxy opened the floodgates for that. So I am super excited with the X-Men back in Marvel's hands, because now they can play in that world. The X-Men really shouldn't be just stuck on Earth. There are so many adventures and so many crazy things they can do that take them off-world.
Boom, mic drop.
Amen.
And I will say that for people who want to catch up, and I am not We're not sponsored by any of these in any way. The Marvel Unlimited deal that they have, it's like, whether it's like $5 or $10 a month, I think it's like $60 a year. They may have changed it from when I did it. It gives you access to like 10,000, 20,000 comics. Like if you're on a budget and you're looking for entertainment to catch up on Marvel comics, the only thing they don't have, as far as I know, is like the last 6 months of new comics. And obviously there's some backlog titles they haven't added, but all of these huge stories across all of their major characters are available digitally. And I would highly recommend that. It's a great value.
Well, I know if we were getting Marvel money, personally myself, I know I would be a lot better. I'm just saying, Marvel.
Yeah, I mean, if Marvel wants to sponsor it, yeah, and we'd all start working out. Imagine the muscles that we'd have.
Well, yeah, we'd have to, right?
Yeah, no, you can't be part of Marvel and not work out.
But I think in 2019 they released that run, the Dark Phoenix run, as in paperback form as well, so you can buy it for like, $17-18 online.
Oh yeah, they definitely have those. Yeah, for those that don't want to go digital, and I know it's sacrilege in a lot of cases. I have probably 1,000 or 2,000 comic books they're not digital. So I mean, I've been collecting comics forever, but I also, when it comes to like catching up, if I'm not going to collect them, if I just want to read through them, I have no problem going digital. But if people don't want to, if they want to be able to hold the physical version, yes, they do sell all of them in trade collected editions.
Nice. There's a couple ways we can go about this.
There is. So, see, that was my movie pick.
Very nice.
Okay. So we're going to wrap this up in a minute, but we can't not talk about 1980 video games because we talked comics, we talked, and toys. It's what the Rubik's Cube was released in 1980, or is at least popular in 1980. Mm-hmm. So while searching around, there was, does everybody have one? I have one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I had a pyramid one. Which I don't know if that was difficult or not.
We used to have competitions at school, and someone had a little cheat booklet, or it wasn't a cheat booklet, but it was a booklet that told you how to solve the Rubik's Cube. And then the market was flooded with books on how to solve the Rubik's Cube. But you'd have competitions all over school.
That just sounds so very 1980, which is awesome.
Yeah. I sucked at it completely, 100%.
Yeah, I was going to ask Scott, have you ever solved it?
No. I can take all the stickers off and move them to the right sides.
That's funny.
I was going to say, Brian, you just have the Hellraiser version of that, right?
I don't even have that. I was actually thinking, like, if I'm going to get anything, that's going to be the one I get.
Yeah. But yeah, 1980 was pretty big for video games. The biggest release was Pac-Man. Pac-Man was released in 1980.
Never heard of it.
Oh, well, the Pac-Man is this, it's this, game where you're like this little creature that chomps things, and then you move with the joystick up and down, and you can't get caught by ghosts, and you got to kind of chomp all these little bits before the ghosts get you.
Sounds like a ripoff of Ghostbusters to me.
I had the Atari 2600. And the first games I had on it was Space Invaders and golf.
Oh, how was golf? Like, was it?
Oh, it's horrible. It's absolutely horrible. But again, you have to put it in context.
Right.
We were moving up from Pong. Okay. All right. So your little stick man, he looked like he was made, out of stairs. Little blocks, and then his club looked like a staircase, and he would hit the ball, and the entire action on the screen is 30 inches or whatever the size of your TV was, but the space between where you're hitting the ball from and the green was like 3 inches.
Oh wow. Okay.
But again, you didn't know any different. Now, the Space Invaders was quite like the arcade version, right? That one was easier to, you didn't notice the discrepancies in the size of the spaceship as opposed to a golfer, right? So that was a really popular game to play. And I had friends who had Pac-Man, but I didn't have Pac-Man.
Oh, okay.
Were you one of the 3 people who bought the ET arcade game?
No, but I wish
later?
I did. I don't even know anyone who played it.
Yeah.
And
But yeah, so we had Pac-Man, we had Missile Command, we had Battle Zone. There were a lot of. What do we got?
Do we have Donkey Kong yet?
No,
No.
So
I don't
if
think
this
so.
was class of 81, not only would you have Donkey Kong, but you'd have Frogger, Galaga, Defender, and Miss Pac-Man. So just
you missed the best game of 1981, Centipede.
Oh,
That's my jam.
I thought you were going to say Castle Wolfenstein.
No, it's Centipede. I still play Centipede to this day.
My favorite game that no one remembers is called Vanguard.
Oh, I played Vanguard.
Oh, that was my favorite game.
Yes, although it was on like a PlayStation 1 collection of Atari games.
Oh, was
That's okay. It counts.
Yeah.
I used to play it in the arcade, and I was just hooked on it.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I could see totally putting some coin, spend a lot of coin on that.
Mm-hmm.
But and this was like the era when, because like my dad, he played a lot of arcade games too, and he would always talk about how like the gas station would have a cabinet game, and you could just go down to the gas station and play the same game and just spend a bunch of quarters on it. But it was like that's how you played video games, you know, or like the state fair would have a whole bunch of arcade games in it, you know. So
the game in the 70s. In the 70s, the game that I saw around everywhere, that was in every the pool area of every hotel, was called Boot Hill. And it was just a basic Boot Hill. It was just a basic shooter game, right? Cowboys, right? And then when you died, you got a little tombstone on the top of the hill, right? But it, super basic. I mean, there's nothing to it. It was like one step up from Pong, but that game was everywhere.
Wow. So that they just shipped it off all over the world, really, from the sounds of it.
I probably sound like an old prospector talking about it too.
No, I love playing. I still love playing the original arcade games. We have a place over here where we can go to do live karaoke, and they have like 20 or 30 arcade games. So you'll find me playing Centipede when things open back up.
Nice. Yeah, it's been nice. They have that over here too, and it's really nice to see that, because a lot of cases, like that's how you preserve those cabinet games, is that they find a good home, and that's the only way people can play them sometimes.
You guys are living in the past, man. I play Crash Bandicoot.
Hey, that's my jam too.
I'm living in the 2000.
Hey, we got PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X coming out this fall. Taking us back
I just got the 4.
modern
Okay.
days. Yeah, 5's coming out.
Might as well throw that out, Scott.
No, you got garbage.
Okay, and it sounds like we've taken our trip back to 2020, and actually I kind of like 1980 given how 2020 is right now. Could spend a little more time in 1980, but I want to thank my co-hosts, and I also want to give a special shout out to Heather Wixon, because she always does such a great job, both in terms of writing articles and contributing, but also behind the scenes. For those that don't know, that Heather is the one who's really been, and she's the one who started the class of series at Daily Dead, and has really been organizing it, bringing in different guests, picking the movies, helping, come up with special features, podcast topics and whatnot. So anyway, a big shout out to Heather. And then for everybody who, hasn't had a chance to catch up, go to dailydead.com and check out our Class of 80 features. And you can read more of everybody's thoughts here. And then some of the rest of the Daily Dead team, what they have to think about some titles we discussed and didn't discuss during this podcast. And we have some surprises coming up as well this next week. So anyway, so keep an eye out for that.
We love you, Heather. I just wanted to say that.
Of course.
Yes.
Hooray.
Woo.
And also want to thank Brian, our engineer, for helping us out each and every episode.
We
So
love you
thanks,
too, Brian.
Amen.
And
Preach it.
we can't not thank our Corpse Club members. So thank you for Corpse Club members who, help support our day-to-day. We're able to do this thanks to you. If you're
I
interested...
love you, Corpse Club members.
Thanks, Brian. And yes, we love the Corpse Club members. And if you're interested in becoming a Corpse Club member, go to corpseclub.com. Check out our latest episode, or not just our latest episode, but our backlog of episodes. And we have details on how you can sign up. You get a Corpse Club pin, shirt, access to tons of bonus content. And so check it out. Don't forget to rate and review us on Apple Podcasts. Every rating and review really helps, and we thank everybody who's done it so far. You can also find us on Google Play, SoundCloud, all of your favorite podcast providers. And if you want to get in touch, reach out anytime at contact@corpseclub.com. We're on Twitter at Daily Dead News, at Corpse Club. We're on Instagram and Facebook under Corpse Club as well. Thanks again for listening, and until next time, stay scary.